consent seems so simple, then why does non-consent feel so normalized? In this lesson, we're examining rape culture, power, social conditioning, and the systems that shape how society understands consent. Hey class, welcome to A Broad Sex Education, the sex education you deserve that actually makes sense. I'm your host and researcher on rape culture, Sin. And today, my co-hosts are Brooklyn and Asa.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. This is lesson 15. Why does non-consent feel normalized? The impact of rape culture. This podcast is a sex education resource for adults. We have real inclusive conversations about human sexuality, relationships, consent, identity, and culture. Today's lesson includes discussion of rape, sexual assault, coercion, abuse, misogyny, and violence against women. Some listeners may find these topics emotionally difficult or triggering. Please take care while listening. Our goal is not to sensationalize harm, but to examine how culture, systems, and social conditioning shape the way society understands consent and sexual violence. For help in the U.S., call the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-4673 or visit rainn.org. International resources are also linked in the episode description. You deserve to know what this conversation includes so you can make an informed choice to listen or not. That's what consent looks like, even here. Welcome, you guys.
Thanks for having us back.
Yeah, I think it's really nice that you're getting perspectives from both a male and female as you make your way through this.
Yeah. Well, I think this is also such a big topic that it's better to include as many people in the conversation as you can.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice way to put it. And I think we all feel very safe with each other. So it's nice to have people that you feel safe in the room having the discussion. And obviously your audience is part of the discussion in a different way, but still very valid way.
This one is very topical because of everything that has happened in the world. I think this is a good one to look at because we talk about a lot of the violence that happens in the world, but we don't really talk about how it's perpetuated in society. So I felt like this is something worth doing a deep dive on.
When I feel like, I don't know if I'm just noticing it more lately, but it feels especially exacerbated in recent years. Do you feel that way too, Lisa?
I feel like it's politically charged.
Yeah.
It comes with let's just call it an administration. That's my perception.
Yeah, I think that is exactly what I've been noticing. This is something that I feel like has, in recent years, really caught my attention, and I didn't used to feel so divided from men as a whole like I do now.
Yeah. I think you and I are in the same boat. When I experienced it, I was like, oh, I thought we all agreed with this is bad. In college, taking a sociology class, learning what rape culture was, and seeing that play out now more actively in public has brought that lesson to the forefront. So I bring it here.
I feel like a lot of relationships in my personal life and my family life have been strained because of this. So I'm glad that you're bringing it to light.
All right, let's go to the lesson plan for today. So first we're going to do an English lesson where we break down what consent, non-consent, boundaries, the legal definitions of rape, and how consent is looked at under the law. Then sociology, we're going to examine how power, control, and cultural messaging contribute to the normalization of non-consent. And then at the very end, we're going to have a math pop quiz. We're going to examine the statistics behind sexual violence, reporting, and prosecution to understand the broader social impact of rape culture. Also, if you are lucky enough to be listening on YouTube, we have the presentation. I mention this all the time, but there's also going to be a special side lesson for you. There's art history woven throughout the lesson to show how art and mythology show power and non-consent have been portrayed and normalized over time.
Yeah.
All right. So first up is English, defining consent and boundaries. The title slide has a sculpture known as the Rape of Persephone. Persephone was she was the goddess of like springtime, wasn't she?
Yeah, so she gets kidnapped by Hades and taken to the underworld. And her mom is devastated and grieving. So they come to an arrangement that because we need to produce vegetables and crops on Earth, that she can come back and visit her mom. So that's when springtime comes and everything blooms again. And then everything goes barren when she goes back to the underworld.
Oh, yeah. Well, this sculpture is a Baroque sculpture that depicts Hades abducting Persephone and bringing her into the underworld. And it's a depiction of abduction, force, physical domination, helplessness, and it shows how mythology had romanticized violence.
Right. And Hades, like in Christianity, the devil is a negative connotation, like you don't want to go to hell. But Hades wasn't really seen as a negative connotation. He was just ruler of the underworld. So they didn't have like a negative, this is a bad thing.
Right.
I find this interesting because if I had only seen the sculpture itself, right, I can definitely say, oh, well, she looks like she does not want to be there, right? She definitely exhibits the, like, I do not want to be manhandled by this,
Yeah.
by this guy, right?
He's grabbing her. Her hand is faced towards her head, like attached to his head.
Pushing away from him.
Right.
Yeah, and she's completely facing away from him while he's gripping her.
Which is interesting to me because when I think about that story, right, the mythological story, I don't ever hear of it as a rape, right? It's more of just like, oh, he abducted her. Right? He took her away from her family, right? But I think this sculpture conveys the fact that by the process of abduction, you are forcibly taking somebody who doesn't have the power necessarily to fight back or like, clearly her voice is not being listened to in this scenario, right?
And it's like the ultimate power play because he's a literal god and she's a human.
Right.
And her own mother can't protect her. Like there's also another victim, which is her mother, who is grieving. But like you, when I first heard the story, did not associate rape with it. And even this might just be like my own naivety. When I first saw the sculpture, I also didn't think it was a rape. I was like, this is a beautiful sculpture.
Yeah.
The abduction of Persephone. I could understand that.
Yeah.
This is from the artist Gian Lorenzo Bernini. It was created between 1621 to 1622. Anyway, so for this English section, we're going to start off with what is consent? So consent in terms of sex is a freely given, informed, enthusiastic agreement to participate in any sexual act. Consent can be withdrawn at any point, and there is also a description for implied consent, which is consent that is assumed based on actions, body language, or context. It can be misunderstood and misread, and the best way to navigate if you are ever unsure if the consent is implied is to communicate and ask directly. With your words. Yeah. Yes.
It's interesting to me that there is nothing included about sobriety. And the reason I think that's interesting is because I remember when I was in college for my undergrad, there was a lawyer and he came and did a whole presentation specifically about how to not accidentally get charged with rape. And it was like, if you're both drinking and one of you is a lot more drunk than the other person, that person, they're not capable of giving the same amount of consent. And so, like, there was still gray areas around that. And he had had a client that went to prison for this. And so he was trying to go out to college campuses and spread the word to, like, not have other people fall into that category. So it's interesting that sobriety is not mentioned. I guess I see why it wouldn't be because it needs to be a law. But I did find that interesting.
It's interesting that he went to like, this is how you don't get charged with rape rather than like, don't rape people. But also, here's how the law works against.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I wasn't going to say this, but it was like a promising young man had gone to prison and he was charged with the rape because the girl was more drunk than him.
Yeah, we'll go to the legal definitions. In this picture, we have Psyche revived by Cupid's kiss. This was from Antonio Canova, and it is Cupid kind of leaning in, embracing someone about to kiss them, and it is a marble sculpture that shows mutual affection, tenderness, intimacy, and consent and reciprocity.
Yeah, her body language is obviously very different. Turning towards him, not away. And also pulling him closer instead of pushing him away.
Yeah. So the difference between boundaries and preferences, and I think this is important to add because boundaries are part of consent as well, is what you're willing to say yes and no to. So a boundary is a limit that you set by changing your own behavior to protect your comfort or safety. So it's something that you set up, but if it is not followed through by the other person, you change your behavior towards the other person. Versus a preference is something you like or want, but are flexible about. Preferences are about something you enjoy. Boundaries are about what you will and won't do. If you want more information about understanding consent better, we talked about this in the last episode, but there is the Tea and Consent video by Blue Sea Studios. I really love this video about how to teach consent. The last lesson was a follow-up about what the video leaves out that me and Asa did, where we just went into detail. I recommend watching this video and then listening to our reactions to it.
Yeah, this one was like, I feel like very viral, very well known. I wish I'd met your podcast and doing an episode about consent, and my one friend immediately was like, link to this thing.
Mm-hmm. And then they also have one for children that's not tea focused, but it's a little kid narrating what consent is and bodily autonomy for kids. Like, if your parents tell you to kiss someone goodbye, you don't have to do that. It's your body. You can decide.
I wish that existed when I was a kid.
Right. My parents made me kiss a dead body when I was a little kid. It was my grandmother on my dad's side. But, like, I don't like dead bodies.
That happened in my family, too. Not necessarily, like, dead relatives. Little kid, give the grandma a kiss, whatever, like. I don't know, it's an interesting cultural...
And
Yeah, like, I mean, is that the forced kiss is the way to show love and respect to your elders? I don't know.
Right.
It's very odd. It's always been odd to me.
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate parents are like, sure, he doesn't want to do that, I know, but they'll wave to you. But, like, for some older people, like, that's not acceptable form of affection.
Yeah.
A wave. Why do you want physical affection from a child so badly that you're forcing it upon them?
I think it's a status thing. I think it's like, I'm a good grandmother and I need to have this vision of myself. And it's genuinely, the kid probably just doesn't spend a lot of time with you.
Yeah.
So that's why they're probably not comfortable going up and hugging and kissing you.
Yeah.
And so I think it is a status thing. And like, no, my friends need to know that my grandchild loves me or whatever. I think that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
It's also just because they're, like, elder, too. Like, oh, you should have this because you're elder.
Like, respect your elders.
Yeah.
Of thing.
In the eyes of the law, rape under U.S. federal law is penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or anus with any body part or object, or oral penetration by a sex organ or another person without the consent of the victim.
That's different than sexual assault, which could be like not penetration. Sexual assault could not be penetration.
Yeah. Sexual assault can be if, like, someone's groping you. Rape specifically involves penetration. For a long time, it didn't include anal sex.
Oh.
And so that was also part of the issue with the definition for a long time because it didn't consider the queer people who are getting assaulted.
Right. I didn't realize that.
And then aggravated rape is when rape is accompanied by the use of either weapons, serious injury, two or more people in the midst of another felony, or when it targets vulnerable victims. So more extreme cases is when you can get charged for aggravated rape.
Yeah. And I think when I was a kid and I first learned what rape was, in my mind, that was always what rape was, because I think that's what's portrayed in the media.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody's always warning you about. And I don't know at what point I even came to realize the other definition of like, no, it could be somebody that you know, and it could be like coercion, or they don't have a weapon or things like that.
Yeah. Did I tell you about how the very first thing that I ever asked my mom that was sex related was I asked her what rape was?
No.
I remember everything about it for some reason. But we were in the car. We were in the parking lot of Circus in the parking structure looking for parking. We had just watched a Lifetime movie where like two military men took a woman away into a bar. They didn't show anything. It was an implied scene. But then afterwards, she comes out and she was screaming to someone saying, he raped me or they raped me. And then I was thinking about that a few days later. And then I asked my mom in the car, I was like, Mom, what is rape? And she's like, it's a very bad thing. But that's the only thing that she told me about it.
Okay.
Which-
And how old were you at this time?
I felt like 7 or 8.
Okay.
I was pretty young.
Did you know what sex was yet?
No.
Okay.
But at this time, I was being assaulted at the time. So even at that point, she skirted around it. I still didn't get any information on it. That's the earliest memory I have about asking my parents about something sex related.
Right.
And
And it was like a don't talk about it kind of thing. Like, it's a very bad thing. Don't talk about it.
right.
I think very similar to Brooklyn in that, like, my perception of rape, the first thing I think about it was like, oh, like the medieval, you know, the terrible knights are like running around and they're raping women by just taking them and beating them. Like, it's very aggravated, very forceful, violent, right, was kind of my impression.
And
would
almost
say.
like a one-time event versus like the alternative. That's actually, I think I just figured out when I learned that it could also be date rape. When I learned the term deep rape,
Yeah.
then I was like, oh, sometimes it's not aggravated rape.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I will go into it more in the sociology section. But the law focus on the stranger danger. It's like the person lurking in the dark when that isn't necessarily always the case. How they define sexual consent under the law is, did the alleged victim give consent freely? And were they deemed capable of giving consent? And that's what you were saying, the lawyer was saying. If they are far more intoxicated, then they are unable to give informed consent.
That makes sense. Or like if they are underage, then they cannot give an informed consent.
Yes. Speaking of underage, while doing this presentation, I was learning about the history of consent laws. I found it so interesting, so that will probably be a follow-up mini lesson.
I think it's interesting to see the legal definitions, right? I mean, obviously there are different definitions of rape versus aggravated rape. But it's interesting to me to see that the law defines it purely as penetration, right? That's the sole determination
For rape.
for rape. Yeah. Whereas I'm guessing that we didn't actually define assault in that slide, but I'm guessing that kind of covers everything else. Yeah.
And that matters in court too, because of sentencing
Right.
and things like that. When I go on Megan's Law website and I'm looking around my neighborhood to see what predators are around, I'm reading exactly what they did and which ones are coming up where. So I've seen all of the definitions.
This is a random thought that came up while I was thinking about this. It's like, imagine a world where biologically we evolved, that where males are still the physically dominant ones, but women have the penises. I feel like in that reality, how would the male rape someone to the same extent? Like, what would be the definition of penetration, right? I feel like there's an element there of like, because there is a physical insertion that is happening, I don't know, it seems...
This is a really interesting point because it didn't even register in my mind. Obviously, women can rape men and it happens, but it didn't even occur to me that like the legal definition doesn't really
Right, that's what I'm saying.
cover that.
Yeah, it is purely a male assailant in this part must be able to penetrate, right? And that could be a male penetrating an anus, right? That's cool that we add that in the law, right? But I mean, I maybe have to read it again, but I didn't really read a way where the opposite could be true.
Yeah, the law doesn't cover the extent of it. Attached to this slide is Apollo and Daphne. Apollo was a Greek god who just loved sleeping around, as they all did. But Daphne was I believe she was a nymph, a forest nymph. And this statue depicts her running away from Apollo as he is chasing her. But the statue, you can see she's already turning herself into a tree to avoid Apollo. It depicts pursuit, refusal, and escape, a power imbalance, and showing that it may be romantic to chase someone even though it's not consensual and she's literally running away from him. So sociology, this is going to be the biggest section. We're going to go in the deeper dive of the impact of rape culture. This picture for the opening slide is the abduction of Europa, which is a story about how Zeus, which is this bull right here, he disguised himself as a bull because he wanted this lady. Her name is Europa. So he disguised himself as a bull and then took her away. This one is...
This was such a fuckboy, by the way. For being the, like, chosen leader of the gods, like, he was such a fuckboy. Like, he was, like, out there messing with mortals all the time, like...
There's no wonder the rest of them were so hypersexual.
Yes.
Because, like, that's your leader.
Yeah.
He also, at some point, turned himself into a swan to, like, impregnate another woman because he liked her. And then he also turned himself into Golden Rain to impregnate. He's done so many things.
Is that sounds like a golden shower play. Like, is that what it is supposed to be or no?
I don't think so. But I know he's used deception a lot to kidnap and take advantage of women.
Portraying himself as someone that he's not. Classic.
So this one is specifically from Titian, and it was painted in 1560 to 1562. So what is rape culture? Rape culture is an environment where behaviors and attitudes towards rape and sexual assault are prevalent, normalized, and excused by society. It's primarily founded on its views on gender and sexuality. The sculpture that is attached to this is from Bologna from 1581 to 1583. It's a sculpture of the rape of the Sabine woman, and it was about Roman men forcibly taking the Sabine woman as their wife after they failed to secure marriages peacefully. So this is a depiction of how a woman was treated as property and men felt entitled to her.
That is such an interesting. I don't know necessarily the Sabine woman is specifically, but like the almost historical frequency of soldiers go to insert location X that's not their home country or whatever, and whether they win or lose the combat, they take women from the place that they went and then either rape them. I've never understood, like, it's just such an interesting conquest, right? Purely as an object, right? And it's so common. It's so frequent in different cultures and societies. That's always been wild to me. Just like how frequent, how many different societies have come to the conclusion that women are an object to be won purely by a man who is, fighting or doing combat. I don't know. It's wild to me.
Rape is considered one of the atrocities of war. Like, America did it a lot during the Vietnam War. I'm not sure about the other ones, but I know for sure in Vietnam they did it a bunch.
Well, and I think it must come from historically women being seen as property of men and not being able to have their own property and traded, and like fathers had their property and then they would sell them off to a man. But ultimately, I feel like it just comes down to the fact that physically women are not stronger than men. And this is something that men have continued to take advantage of, which is shitty, but that's also the dynamic of a victim and assailant.
Right. Rape culture shows up a lot in our society now. So I've listed a few out here. Victim blaming. She shouldn't have been dressing like that. She should have known better than to go walk out in the middle of the night. Slut shaming is making women feel bad for being sexual beings. The sexual objectification, we just talked about it, where it's treating women like sexual objects to be taken and conquered. The trivialization of rape, this is just making it seem not as bad as it actually is, like dismissing it, which leads to the next one, which is a denial of widespread rape, acting like this is something that isn't as big of a problem as it is in our society. Refusing to acknowledge the harm caused by sexual violence, which I don't need to re-emphasize that, that's self-explanatory. We do this in different ways. So like when people say, boys will be boys, it's fine, that's excusing behavior that we should be able to address and say it's wrong. There's another idea that if a boy bullies you, they like you. So it's like we're already inherently telling boys, oh, when you like a girl, you're supposed to treat them poorly, and that bleeds into their adult life as they grow older. And then also the idea that like women are just playing hard to get. They're just saying no because they are just playing hard to get. And that's not usually the case. They're saying no because they didn't want it at the time, nor will they want it in the future.
Well, so the last one I was actually talking to our mutual friend about that because her point was like that could be where coercion might be confusing for men because playing hard to get is portrayed a lot in movies and things like that. And I feel like a lot of dating books that are based on the like evolutionary concepts, which if I'm actually reading this book right now called Bonded by Evolution, and he's basically debunking all of that. They didn't really do a scientific study. It wasn't done properly. But so I think all of those concepts, like all the dating books that are based on that say like, well, you have to play hard to get, like men are hunters and biologically that's what they want. And so I think unfortunately, that has become part of our society and our culture. So I think going back to the early slides where you mentioned if you're not sure, use communication to determine if the person is into it or not, because they'll let you know.
Yeah.
I was going to comment on the second bullet point there, which is if a boy bullies you, they like you. But the trouble thing with that is like I genuinely know adult men who do bully women when they like them.
I do too.
Well, it's frustrating because like it's kind of exactly the case of, oh, well, this is somebody who maybe they interred that as a child, or maybe that was what they saw, monkey see, monkey do. But it comes across painfully, because, if you talk with the woman in that particular situation, there is that negativity. And it's like, how do you debunk something like that? How do you train young people so that they can grow up and not think that that's an inherent way to share affection, right? It's very interesting.
I have a question. Do you think that men do that because it's a way of kind of trying to gauge interest without being actually vulnerable?
No,
'Cause
I
it's
think it's
kinda safe?
because they're genuinely ignorant in a way of expressing honest feeling, and they haven't done the reflection, maybe, to be like, oh, I kind of like this person, but there's sort of this gut reaction to be like, well, if I can just make them notice me somehow, maybe that'll allow there to be an interaction.
It's like attention seeking
Yeah,
behavior.
that's the best way I can describe it.
I think fundamentally aggression is associated with masculinity. So boys are being told like, oh, this is how you show women you like them. Toxic masculinity. This is the only way to show a woman that you like them because it's a power dynamic. Bullying is a power dynamic in and of itself. So you're basically allowing this power dynamic to play out because it's a way of saying that the only acceptable way for a man to show any emotion is if they show an aggressive emotion. And so it's emphasizing that belief to young boys.
I feel like sometimes instead of using the word bullying, people will use the word teasing.
Yeah.
And then teasing is quote unquote flirting.
Right.
And so it's like all of these softer words that are inserted.
Right. Because there have been instances where like a boy is like shoving a girl all the time. And then when the girl's like, how do I get him to stop? And they're like, well, it's probably just because he likes you.
Right. He should be flattered.
Yeah. Some other ways this plays up is gender expectations, like how a woman and a man behave, emphasized again by this. Boys can only show aggression because that's a positive male trait. Mm-hmm. And that's the only way it can show up. Women can only be like demure or like vulnerable. It's just having rigid gender expectations, which obviously leads to a lot of misogyny. So I think rape culture is like inherently tied to misogyny.
Right.
We see this happen in a lot of current events. It's showing up a lot now. And I think one of the first instances that it kind of got brought up in the culture while our current president was running for his first term, that's when the Access Hollywood footage came out where he bragged about boldly kissing women without their consent, grabbing them by their genitals, and simply having his way and saying, quote unquote, when you're a star, they just let you do it. So I know a bunch of us are obviously not happy about it, but we all are very aware that we have a sexual predator as president.
Right. And I think that's for me why I have such a hard time maintaining relationships with either family members or people that I thought were close friends that support him, because like, I'm a woman, you're supposed to care about my well-being.
Right.
And if we're all in agreement that like, yeah, I mean, he did rape women and children, they came forward and said that, but his policies though,
Right.
like, why are we looking the other way? This is obviously like a despicable human being action.
Right.
Like, why, if we can't agree on that, we cannot find common ground.
Right. I'm in the same boat. I will actively not engage with someone who believes in his policies, specifically because I am someone who has survived this kind of assault. Like, I have experience and I have first-hand knowledge. And by disregarding his predatory nature for the sake of policies is you saying to me that this isn't a big enough problem. It's not a big enough issue. It's not a deal breaker, and that's concerning.
Yeah. No, I tried to talk to a lot of these people. I have talked to a lot of these people about it, and we just cannot come to an agreement on that specific exact thing. Mm-hmm. Women came forward and said, this man raped me at some point.
Yeah.
Not even including all of the underage victims.
There's already too many instances. 23 is already too many.
Like I don't know anybody in my day-to-day life that 23 women have accused of rape.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that number.
Not to have people in my life
Right.
that are
Then I start to think, you know, there might be something to this.
double digits is a lot.
Right.
One is a lot.
Right.
Yeah, one, I'm already concerned. 23, I'm starting to think you might be lying.
Yeah. This is how it shows up. The painting for this one is Tarquin and Lucretia. This is from Titian in 1571, and it depicts the assault of Lucretia by Sextus Tarquinius, a Roman prince. And according to the legend, the aftermath of her assault contributed to the overthrowing of the Roman monarchy. And this shows coercion, intimidation, power, violence against women, and social consequences of assault. So essentially, he assaulted her and then was trying to kill her also.
Well, and it's also an interesting portrayal by the artist because in addition to the body language, he's fully clothed and she's nude, so she is already visually is already more vulnerable just in that component too.
It's also the color schemes, right? Bright red,
Yeah,
dark,
aggression,
red.
anger, yeah.
Rape is about power, control, and entitlement. People think they just can't help themselves because they're so sexually motivated, and that is not true. Sex is one of the most intimate and pleasurable experiences that people involved should enthusiastically enjoy together. But rape is taking that experience, disregarding the other person's willingness to partake and or enjoy, and in the moment they're prioritizing their own desire, power, gratification, entitlement, or control over another person's autonomy and humanity.
Yeah, I would say the motivator behind sex would be potentially lust or love, and the motivator behind rape feels like it's hate.
It's anger,
Yeah.
aggression. I learned about this in college when I really learned what rape culture was. Learning that it was more about power and control, for some reason, was healing to me. It was healing to know that this was oh, this is something that's wrong with that person.
Yeah.
And not hell to me. Nothing was my fault. That person fucked up because they wanted to exert power over a child. And that is why they are in the wrong.
And currently I'm reading When the Body Keeps the Score, and a lot of the victims of childhood sexual trauma in that book, they have to heal. Part of it is them realizing, because they had been previously blaming themselves, and so them realizing it's not their fault.
Right.
Especially once you have an adult brain and you look back and you're okay, obviously as a kid I didn't have these skills, I didn't even understand what was happening.
I think the tricky part is I have not been in a situation, but I feel like the questions would just keep coming in terms of well, why did it happen to me?
Mm-hmm.
What did I do to cause this? And I feel like if it's with a child, the child's brain is not necessarily maybe capable of thinking about it from the other person's perspective, and whatever it is that they were grappling with, the insecurity, feel powerful, I don't have control, I am not feeling like I'm given what I deserve because of entitlement or whatever, right? And so I decide that I'm going to act on that by abusing this child, right? But a kid can't comprehend that.
Mm-hmm.
They're thinking about only their world.
Right.
What did I do? What did I do to deserve this? It's more closed-minded because
Right.
that's all you know. That's all
Right,
you
you're
can
taught
think.
that your actions have consequences.
Yeah.
So you're man, what action did I do
Right.
to bring this?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that also gives you control. If it is something you did, then you can stop it from happening again.
Right.
But when it's not something in your control, then it's not in your control.
Some examples of rape being about power and control is obviously the workplace. That's why we have the sexual assault training, especially in California, because of workplace harassment. So it's a person that is in position of power because they can decide how your career goes, exerting that power over you. Schools, it happens in schools.
Obviously, it's rampant in the Boy Scouts. It's rampant in the Catholic Church. Those are institutions that it's been caught often. I think what happens a lot is that people that are predators are going to seek out those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And so while not all of these people are predators, the ones that are making the news are the ones that have put themselves in a position where they have access to vulnerable children.
This slide is the myth of the monster. So there's a belief that people who rape are usually stranger danger, people lurking in the dark, but that isn't necessarily true. 60% of rapes are committed by someone the survivor already knows.
So in that book, The Body Keeps the Score, the author talks about how when he started this research, it was generally considered very uncommon for incest and child molestation to be happening. And then as he starts talking to people, he's like, how could it be possible that I have all of these victims in my office, unless it's way more prevalent than we realize?
Yeah, it's very common. There is a researcher, Dr. David Lisak from the University of Massachusetts in Boston. He's a psychologist who does research on the undetected rapists, which are men who commit rape but who are not reported or are not prosecuted for crimes. When he was doing his research, one of the things that he did is he put an ad out that said, "Are you a rapist? And honestly, call this number to help with a survey." And he thought no one would go for it, but a bunch of people called.
Wow. So they like know they're rapists too. They're not justifying it in any way.
Yeah. And in his research, he noted that a lot of them would use extensive planning and premeditation for their crimes. They frequently used alcohol and drugs to incapacitate the person, and they would use force and threats to scare people into submission. He has a research paper where he talks about the different characteristics of an undetected rapist, and I wanted to go through them. This is research from 2002. So undetected rapists believe how much they have sex determines how successful or like a man they are. They view women as objects to be conquered and used. They believe in traditional gender roles for men and women. They have chronic underlying hostility towards women. They have strong needs to dominate and control women and fear being controlled by them. They tend to be more emotionally constricted. They have difficulty labeling their emotional experience and are less emotionally expressive and less empathetic. They're usually influenced by sexually violent subcultures, so this can include fraternities, but the most popular one, and we are seeing it played out in the manosphere right now, so that's a huge one. They tend to see themselves as a hyper-masculine. They believe that the aggression and violence makes you a man. They have daddy issues. A lot of people think that they hate their mother, and that's not true. They usually have deep-seated resentments towards their father, so either their father was masculine and they're trying to exemplify that, but they don't have a necessarily good relationship with their father, or their father wasn't as masculine as they thought that they should have been.
Their father wasn't, or their father didn't think they were.
Both.
Okay, interesting. That's very interesting because I also would assume they hated their mothers.
Yeah. And then they were often children who experienced child abuse.
Sin and I watched the
Into the Manosphere.
Manosphere documentary not too long ago, which is very, very interesting and scary to watch. But there's a really interesting section in there where they're showing in interviews they've had one of the streamers in the Manosphere, and he is like at home with his mom, and they have like a, I would say, rather positive relationship to each other.
Oh, and
She's like telling him to like pick up the thing that's on the floor because, you know, like very like domestic, typical sort of thing. Dad's not anywhere in the picture. And I just think of that as like a very, very clear example in my head as like, oh, like, you know, if there is a young boy who is potentially seeking the example of the masculine father or father figure or whatever, and they're just, for some reason, it's not there, you know, maybe that's an issue. Or if the dad was there and like really conflicted with the son, like a lot of cases.
That guy too made a whole video about how he confronted his dad because his dad was a footballer and traveled a lot, so he didn't like see him, and then he reconnected with him and made like a whole video about it, but it was him attacking his dad.
okay.
So in that case, the dad had left, like was
Like,
busy traveling.
He wasn't a presence in his
He
life.
was working.
Got it.
Yeah.
Being a traveling football player.
Yeah.
Yeah. Side note. Yeah. That is super interesting.
This is a super interesting list, I would say. Of traits.
Oh,
It's fascinating.
I have more though. I'm gonna add
this
more
is
to
the
this.
first part of the
This
list.
is just the first one. There's
Part
so
one.
much. I didn't even add it as a second list. So majority of serial offenders commit other acts of violence like battery or child abuse. They often believe in rape myths like she was asking for it because of how she was dressed, or it doesn't really count because she didn't say no, or it doesn't count because we're together, we're in a relationship.
This is fascinating to me because this is from this source, right? The undetected rape. So this example of person who answered the call that said, "Are you a rapist?" said, it doesn't count as rape because, like, no, you know in your head that you answered the email, the Craigslist post or whatever the fuck this was, to say, I am a rapist, and yet,
But not that time.
right. That's wild.
It's interesting because it's like, I want you to think of me as something masculine, but I need to make sure it's not enough for I get in trouble with the law.
It's uncomfortable to think that you know somebody and that it can happen with somebody that you know and that you trust that's in your home. So
Right.
nobody wants to admit that they know a rapist.
Yeah.
Mm.
They easily feel slighted and hold grudges. This is a form of performed masculinity because they view the only way to succeed as a man is to have money and to have sex with a lot of women. But they seek the validation of that from other men.
They want other men to be impressed and wowed by them rather than other women. Like, they don't actually care about getting the women because it's not the women that they respect, it's the men that they respect.
Yeah. The quote that I wanted to read you specifically is, they strive to always behave in rigidly and stereotypically masculine ways. They're always on alert for any perceived slight to their masculine identities, and they are made very anxious by any situation that might cast doubt on their perceived masculinity.
This is such an ASA-coded response, but my gut reaction to this is like, let's say I know somebody who exhibits several of these traits. Like, what do you do to soften this fucking societal view that they've concocted for themselves? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this is such deep-rooted insecurity, and your perspective on the world is so warped by hypermasculinity and performed masculine traits that, like, how do you possibly undo that, you know, without, like, saying, hey, we really think you should start expressing your emotions and go to therapy, right? Like genuinely, I'm asking, like, I don't know how you would do that, you know?
That's a good point, because I don't see a man that perceives himself as hyper masculine going to therapy.
It even says in there, has difficulty labeling their emotional experience.
Yeah.
Less emotionally expressive. Like, to me, that screams, I don't know how to reflect on my own actions or describe words, feelings,
I don't know how to use my words.
Yeah, like, genuinely, that's
Yeah.
that's how I perceive that, right? ASA would love to know. How does the person who did all these interviews, you know, go on after that and be like, okay, now I know somebody, like, how do I break down some of this a little bit?
Yeah, what do I do?
Right.
We'll get to it. There's a slide on it.
Great.
There's a quote, I forgot what it is specifically, but it's like, it's easier to create better boys than to change.
Oh, yes.
What is it? It's easier to make better boys than to change men.
Yeah, to change grown men or bad men.
Let me
I know it. I know the quote you're talking about. It's basically like, give up on the ones that are already done. We gotta start from scratch.
I don't remember. I will look it up.
I looked it up and I was just curious. So apparently, 98 to 99% of all rapes, the perpetrators were male.
Mhm.
Which I think makes sense based on the definition of the law
Right.
of rape. Right.
This guy wrote this in 2002, and where we barely had the internet. Another line that I wanted to read says, when such deeply held beliefs are combined with the effects of sexually violent subcultures, it can be a really dangerous thing, which we see now.
Right.
I think the internet has exacerbated this. This is
I
2002.
didn't even put that together. I immediately thought Craigslist post. This is like newspaper.
Yeah,
This is like, are you in the classifieds? Are you a rapist?
Yes.
Please contact
Yeah.
this number.
Yeah.
This was in
Wild.
2002, where he put it in the paper, and he was like, call this number. And it was like, he got over 1,000. It was like 1,800
This
something.
was before it was so easy for rapists to network with each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then another thing that he put was, when a woman resists their coercive pressure, they're likely to perceive this as a challenge and act with aggression and anger, which already restores his sense of adequacy. So it's like, oh, I have to react this way because I'm a man, and that's what makes me a man. So, like, because they got slighted, it's their way of, like, soothing in a sense. So the reason why this is really important is because this affects how we view it in the criminal justice system today. So in 2014, a judge in a rape case for a 16-year-old who had raped another 16-year-old while she was intoxicated, he denied trying him as an adult because he came from a good family who put him into an excellent school.
I feel like this is a common thing where the rapists have such bright futures and the judge is so concerned about preserving that, but there's zero concern about what this has done to the victim's life and how they're going to be impacted by this. And also the impact of a complete stranger who's in this field and as a professional is like, well, I mean, yeah, he violated your body and traumatized you, but like, I don't want to ruin his life. Like, how disempowering as a victim to hear that another person that's a neutral party that's supposed to be serving justice doesn't even
The
value.
arbiter. Yeah.
Yeah. He questioned during the trial if this was really rape because, quote unquote, traditional rape involves strangers and weapons. So
Wow.
he already had this preconceived notion of what a rapist does. So
Right.
he dismissed the kid's ability to be a rapist already. Eventually, he got a bunch of death threats because people were up in arms about it socially.
Good
So,
people.
love social shame. Keep doing this social
Yeah,
shame
that's
thing.
all we have.
Yeah.
The institution's not going to do shit.
Exactly. I'm like, look at where we're at. That's what we need.
And so in June of 2019, it was overturned. And because of all the death threats and everything, he resigned in July of
I don't think you're
2019.
good at your job, sir.
That was originally in New Jersey. There was another judge who, when a woman was requesting a restraining order against her assailant, he asked her if she could have just closed her legs to prevent the rape.
The judge asked that?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so he was also
Feel like that's good. Just the fact that they're ballsy enough to say these things is very upsetting. That they've obviously said things like that before behind closed doors and it just hasn't come to light. And those are the people that are dealing and handling a rape case.
This also has a lot to do with what's happening now with the Rape Academy. So the Rape Academy is an online forum, a website where men are teaching other men how to rape women while they're unconscious, and it's usually their wives. One of the notable examples of this happening, which is how it got brought to light, is from this woman. I wrote a bunch of notes about her because her story is so fascinating. So Giselle Pellicote was married to a man named Dominic Pellicote. She's an older woman. She's in her, I think in this picture, she was in her 70s. But her husband was a 70-year-old man who connected with other men online in July 2011 to organize the gang rape of his wife over a 10-year period in a southern village in France. He would continuously drug her in her sleep, and she was raped over 200 times by 70 different men from the ages of 20s to early 70s. The only people who were tried in this case were Dominic and 49 others. And he would use these online forums to communicate. And then these men would travel 31 miles to rape her in like the dead of night.
Was he just posting an ad, like looking for someone to rape my wife? And the guys were like, sure.
It was a chat room site known as coco.fr, which is like the France website. And the forum was specifically called Without Her Knowledge. And so the website ended up getting taken down from France because of the uproar from this case. But Dominic would share videos of him raping his wife, and she didn't even know. So in this 10-year period, she didn't even know this was happening because she was drugged. But she would always wake up with a lot of pelvic pain and memory loss because the drugs were affecting her so much. She would always be going to the doctor and be like, I just don't feel good. My pelvis is always hurting. And my memory is like not so good. Like she thought she had Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
She was getting to that point where she was going so frequently. And they did all the tests and they didn't find anything. The only reason it was discovered that this was happening was because Dominic was arrested for filming up women's skirts in the grocery store. And Zell didn't know. The police started doing an investigation on him and collected all of his internet history and all this. So they found all the videos of him raping his wife. They found all the communications he had with people to organize this mass rape ring that he was doing. And they found the 49 other people, but there was over 70, so it was much more. So some people weren't even tried. They had pulled her in and told her, like, hey, like, you've been getting assaulted. We have all of this evidence, right? When the trial was happening, Dominic and 14 others pled guilty, but then other people that were tried argued that they thought that because Dominic, the husband, consented, that it was enough.
So that comes back to the property thing.
Yeah. Others claimed that Dominic forced and manipulated them to do it. They were like, he was the ringleader and all this. Like, we didn't travel 31 miles. We were forced to come over there.
Why would you ever do that with someone that you quote unquote love and married?
That's the part I think that's the most upsetting and like distressing is this poor woman trusted this man above any other man on the planet to make literal life decisions for her if she's in the hospital unconscious. He's in charge of making life or death decisions for her, and she trusted him that much. And then the betrayal and how much she actually didn't even know what he's capable of.
One defendant in the case wasn't tried for raping Giselle, but he was tried for raping his own wife. All of them were found guilty. and they got prison sentences from 3 to 15 years. A few of them appealed their decisions, but they got revoked. One of them was allowed to go through and they did the process for it, but it still got dismissed, so that none of the appeals happened. And then I learned a little bit about her life, but she lived in Paris with this man. They have 3 kids. She supported his lifestyle where he was creating failing businesses. In some point during her marriage, though, she did have a little affair that made them separate, but they ended up coming back together. After they reconciled and everything was okay, they ended up divorcing so they could protect the assets at some point, but then got remarried again in 2007. And during the trial, she also found that he was linked to 3 sexual assault attacks in the 1990s.
On other people?
On other people.
Wow.
The other reason why she is well known is when this came out and when they had to try it, she was like, no, I'm not going to be anonymous. It's their shame. They need to face it. So I'm going to put their name out there. So she became like really iconic because she was like, no, they need to deal with the shame. Put them out there.
That's amazing. I love that she did that. And it's also interesting that so many of the men who participated in it had found a way to justify that, like, well, no, I didn't do anything wrong because her husband said it was okay. What a badass.
Yeah. And so the Rape Academy just shows how this instance is becoming much more prevalent.
I don't think I realized until this news story broke that married men or men in relationships were doing this. Like, this was still, again, like the big bad predator that's like a stranger, not the person that you trust and love in your home.
Yeah. That's why they say the most dangerous thing a woman can do is get married to a man. There's such a big overlap between sexual assault and domestic violence cases as well. But yeah, that is the myth of the monster. Thanks for staying for part 1. How did you guys feel about this one so far? I know this is rough.
I feel like it was more like, you just hear about so many cases of like men protecting other men in these instances. And I feel like what you and I have talked about individually is that men should be protecting women, not protecting other men, but they just keep protecting other men over and over again. And it is really discouraging and disappointing because I feel like recently there's been a lot of strain on relationships with me and like my male friends or male family members. And I used to really feel like I felt so comfortable with men in general, like socially.
Right.
And I feel like because of this shift that we've had as a society and politically, I don't feel comfortable or safe with a lot of them anymore.
Yeah. I feel like within the last probably 5 to 10 years, I've grown increasingly more on edge around men than normal. In any space, it's the thought process of like, this person could potentially hurt or attack me. Anytime we are in a space with a new man that I don't know, that is the default.
Yeah, we're not as open to men in general.
Yeah.
That are unknown.
It's really interesting because I think that a lot of it has to do with, as much as I hated social media, right? Because social media provides an opportunity for the weirdos to be seen as weirdos, but also to rise, as they clearly fucking have, out of the woodworks and into public view, right? Yeah. And why we've elected as many individuals as we possibly can that have proven them to be just the despicable scum of the earth, I will never understand. But I think there is growing awareness because there's enough communication of like, look at the history of this person, right? Look at everything that they've done. And now everybody can see that, right? Like that was not possible 10, 15 years ago because there weren't these massive online communities out there where people could share their hot goss on why this person is such a piece of shit, right? And I think that although I'm not really an active member of social media, I do genuinely believe that very, very broadly speaking, women can be on social media and see all these great examples of men being shitbags and being like, okay, I'm going to be a little bit more cautious about myself. I'm going to be a little bit more withdrawn. I'm going to also, you know, in tandem with their own aspirations for maybe not as much of a domesticated life, right? It leads to this world of, well, I don't really want to seek that out because of all the risks that are involved. And that completely makes sense to me. So,
yeah. And social media has allowed these men to find each other,
which is also fucked, right? That's the other thing is like, it's connects everybody, right? Even the bad actor.
There's an author that I really like. Her name is Laura Bates. She wrote the book Men Who Hate Women. So she just talks about the different spaces of men who hate women. So the manosphere, pickup artists, the men's rights activists, and so on and so forth, and really does like a deep dive on them. She just wrote a second book called The New Age of Sexism, and it talks about how the internet and how technology affects the violence against women. And it's also really interesting because it pretty much was like, it's hard to be a woman online and not get berated. Like, look at all the women who are gamer streamers where it's like a bunch of men talking down to them when they're playing games. It's just another space where women are also attacked. But it's so openly too.
Yeah, it's either that where they're berated or they're sexualized because they're a woman and
Yeah.
they've never encountered one before or something.
Yeah.
I don't have the Instagram app on my phone anymore, but sometimes people will send me reels. So our friend that sent me a reel the other day, it was like a woman saying like using men's own arguments against them. And so she was like, oh, here, I have a bowl that I made for you of these like chocolate covered raisins or almonds or whatever. And then this whole bowl's for you. 2 of them are covered in shit. And then the guy was like, oh, then I don't want it. And she was like, well, but not all of them are. And then he like didn't want to risk it. And so like it was like the argument of like not all men, but do you want to risk it?
Mm-hmm. That's a good one.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
Well, that goes into the next lesson, which will be in part 2.
Looking forward? I am looking forward.
Yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah, I am
Whether
interested.
I'm not like feeling
It's good to communicate about
optimistic.
it. It's good
Yes.
to be talking about it.
Thanks for being part of part 1. I know this is heavy, but you guys are doing great, and we'll come back for part 2.
Yeah, thanks for including.
Thanks for listening and putting up with our attempts at humor in a dark
Yeah.
episode.
I did notice. I was like, I'm not really making jokes, but I don't feel like there's a lot of jokes to be made.
That's it for today. Have any questions about human sexuality? Submit it anonymously using the link in the show notes. If this episode helped you understand something a little better, share it with a friend, because the best way to destigmatize sex is to talk about it. Follow the show to stay updated on future lessons. And if you want to go deeper, grab the Essential Sex Conversations workbook by joining the newsletter. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.